Can you pretend to be my date for tonight? She begged the stranger, who turned out to be a CEO millionaire. The city pulsed with its usual morning chaos, honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and the clatter of heels on pavement. Juliet Hale moved quickly down the sidewalk, blonde hair catching the light, one hand gripping her phone, the other holding a plastic garment bag. Inside was the rented dress she would wear that night. "Your dad wants to make his 60th birthday a big deal," her mother said through the phone. "Our relatives are wealthy and love to show off. He doesn't want to be looked down on." Juliet sighed, dodging a man on a scooter. "I know, Mom." "No, you don't," her mother replied. "He's been saving for this. And after what Uncle Raymond said, I remember," Juliet muttered. "If the party isn't hosted somewhere respectable, I'm not coming." That remark had cut into her father's pride. Walter Hale had always lived with quiet dignity despite their modest means. But instead of arguing, he cashed out savings, borrowed more, and rented an expensive villa on the city's edge. Every detail, from the catering to the music, was curated to impress, all for one night to restore a fragile sense of worth. But despite the tuxedos and chandeliers, there was no luxury car in their driveway. And Juliet had no successful boyfriend to bring, which apparently mattered. "He doesn't want to be embarrassed," her mother added. "You know how much he hates feeling small around your uncle." Juliet pressed her lips together. "I don't have anyone to bring." There was a pause then. "Just don't come alone tonight." The call ended. Juliet turned toward the boutique, lost in thought, heart pounding, and then, impact. Hot liquid splashed across her cream blouse. She gasped. "Oh, I'm so sorry." The man before her didn't move. His crisp white shirt now bore a spreading espresso stain. He had just stepped out of a nearby cafe, takeaway cup in hand, now nearly empty. Behind him, a sleek black Bentley waited at the curb. Juliet looked up. He was tall, sharply dressed, with the kind of calm confidence that made others instinctively step aside. His face unreadable. He didn't frown or speak, just studied her with a steady gaze. She panicked. "I wasn't looking." "Here, let me." Frantically digging in her bag for tissues, she flushed with embarrassment. But before she found any, the man calmly handed the cup to a nearby driver and began unbuttoning his stained shirt. Juliet froze. He slipped off the jacket and shirt with practiced ease, revealing a clean white undershirt beneath. No rush, no words, just quiet control. "I'll pay for the shirt," she blurted. "Or dry cleaning, or I can replace it. Whatever works." But the words came out too fast, and the panic rose higher. And then, before she could stop herself, she heard the next words tumble out. "I know this sounds crazy, but could you pretend to be my boyfriend tonight? Just for tonight? I'll pay you." He raised an eyebrow, slightly amused. Juliet's voice shook. "It's my dad's birthday. All my relatives will be there. They're wealthy, Judgy. He wants me to bring someone so he doesn't lose face. And I don't have anyone. I just thought." She paused, breath catching. "You look the part." Silence. The driver stepped aside. The street noise faded beneath her thudding pulse. The man watched her. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not irritation, not amusement, recognition. It vanished quickly, but she saw it. Then he nodded, slow and sure. "I won't take your money," he said. Juliet blinked. "You'll do it?" He buttoned his coat again, fixed his cuffs, then gave a small, restrained smile, cool and composed. "In your words," he said. "Just for tonight." But his eyes lingered on her face a beat longer. Not calculating, not curious, soft. And somewhere in that look was something Juliet couldn't explain, as if he had seen her before. As if this wasn't the first time their paths had crossed. The villa stood like something out of a dream, nestled just outside the city, lit by amber garden lights and flanked by columns wrapped in ivy and white roses. Inside, candlelight flickered atop polished tables, and a live jazz trio played something soft beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters in black and white passed hors d'oeuvres, and champagne flowed freely. It was exactly the kind of setting Uncle Raymond had deemed respectable enough to attend. But Juliet knew better. Beneath the charm was the weight of unpaid bills, loans, and pride stretched thin. Her father, Walter, stood at the far end of the room, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, adjusting cufflinks as if they cost more than they did. His eyes flicked nervously toward Juliet the moment she entered. She exhaled quietly and stepped into the light, Cain by her side. He wore a dark tailored suit with subtle pinstripes, effortlessly confident. Juliet, in her rented gown and soft curls, tightened her grip on his arm as heads turned. Conversations paused, and eyes landed on them. "You're late," her mother hissed as she leaned in to kiss Juliet's cheek. Her eyes scanned Cain quickly, impressed but trying not to show it. "At least you're not alone." Juliet smiled tightly. "Everyone, this is Cain, my boyfriend. He's in private finance." The word boyfriend came out smoother than she expected, though it still felt unfamiliar. "Ah, finance," Uncle Raymond said, already circling like a shark. "The market's ruthless these days. Only the best survive." Cain met his gaze coolly. "That's true, but I find the real game is knowing when to say no." Raymond blinked, momentarily off guard. He gave a short laugh and walked off, satisfied for now. As the night wore on, Juliet found herself watching Cain more than she realized. The way he listened patiently to her father's long-winded stories, the way he nodded respectfully at older guests, the polite distance he kept from women asking where he was from or what car he drove. He played the role with ease. Too much ease. "You're good at this," Juliet murmured near the dessert table. Cain turned to her, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Do I look like someone who's never lied before?" She blinked, unsure how to answer. Before she could, the band began to play something familiar, a soft jazz version of "At Last." "Oh no," she whispered. "What?" "My mom told the band to play this. It's her test to see if a boyfriend's worth keeping, if he dances when asked." Cain raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Without a word, he took her hand and guided her to the dance floor. The lights dimmed, and people stepped aside, watching. As they moved slowly, Juliet tried not to think too much. But when she looked up, his eyes were already on hers. He leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. "I don't usually say yes to strange requests from women in coffee shops." She smiled. "Lucky me, then." He shook his head faintly. "No. Lucky me." Her heart skipped. "Why?" His hand tightened just slightly around hers. "Because with you, it felt like the right thing to do." Juliet looked away, swallowing. She was forgetting to act. Then a soft cry broke the moment. They turned to see a little girl, no older than 4, in a puffy pink dress, collapse near the dance floor. Juliet's niece. Before Juliet could move, Cain was already beside the child, who had scraped her hand on the stone floor. She whimpered, tears in her wide eyes. "Hey," Cain said gently, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket. He carefully wiped her hand, then looked her in the eye. "Princesses don't cry, do they? Not over a tiny scratch. You know, I used to be a rescue volunteer. I've seen much worse." The girl sniffled, then nodded seriously. He smiled and helped her up, giving a small bow. "They're brave as a knight." Juliet stood nearby, stunned. Around the room, murmurs rose, not gossip, but admiration. People noticed. Her parents noticed. But what hit Juliet hardest wasn't how good he was at pretending. It was the softness in his eyes. He wasn't pretending. Not when he danced with her. Not when he helped her niece. Not when he whispered those words. And for the first time all night, something shifted inside her. Something real. The evening was reaching its peak. Laughter echoed through the villa. Glasses clinked under chandeliers, and the jazz band played a mellow tune that wrapped the room in warm, expensive charm. Everything seemed to flow, at least on the surface. But Uncle Felix had stopped moving. He stood near the fireplace, a half-finished glass of scotch in his hand, his sharp eyes locked on one particular detail, his brows furrowed. Slowly, he stepped forward. Juliet didn't notice at first. She was still trying to calm the butterflies in her chest after the dance. And Kane's whispered words. But her uncle's voice, stern and cutting, silenced the hum of the party. Where did you get those cufflinks? The room stilled. Kane turned his head. His cuff, barely visible under his tailored sleeve, glinted under the chandelier, a sleek silver design, subtle yet recognizable to anyone who had once been inside the uppermost circles of Astor Holdings. Juliet frowned, confused. Felix took another step. Those are limited edition, custom-made, issued only to senior board members, and there were only 20 made. His voice rose just enough for others to start paying attention. Answer me, Felix demanded. Are you? There was a long pause. Then Kane straightened his jacket and replied, calm and unwavering. Yes. Juliet turned to him, her heart stumbling. What is he talking about? Felix slammed his glass onto the side table. He's not just some private finance guy, Juliet. He's Kane Astor, the man who destroyed my company last year with that hostile acquisition. He cut our legs out from under us and walked away without blinking. A low murmur spread like fire through the crowd. Heads turned, gasps, raised eyebrows, whispers behind champagne flutes. Juliet stared at Kane, completely blindsided. You're who? He said. Nothing. Why didn't you tell me your name? She asked, her voice tight. But before he could answer, her mother rushed to her side, grabbing her arm. Juliet, we need to talk now. Walter appeared seconds later, his face pale. Is this true? He asked Juliet, as though she had known all along. You brought him into our house to this night? I didn't know, Juliet said, overwhelmed, shaking her head. I didn't know who he was. Are you in love with the man who made your uncle lose everything? Her father asked in disbelief. She froze. Kane stood a few feet away, still silent, not flinching, not defending. Juliet felt her pulse racing. Her mind reeled. She had never once asked for his full name, never thought to search. Why would she? He had been a stranger, then a partner for one night. But he had moved so naturally through every conversation, through every moment. And now she wondered if it had all been an act. She pushed past the gathering crowd, heart pounding, and grabbed his sleeve. Come with me. She pulled him through the hallway and out onto the back terrace, where the city lights shimmered in the distance beyond the trees. The night air was cooler here. Still, Juliet turned to face him. Tell me the truth. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Kane looked at her, his expression unreadable. Calm still, but behind his eyes something deeper stirred. I didn't lie, he said quietly. You never asked? That's not an answer. I wasn't hiding, he added. I just didn't want that to be the reason you looked at me. Juliet blinked, hurt. And what reason should I have? Because you said yes to a desperate girl on a sidewalk? He was quiet for a moment. The wind stirred the trees. I didn't say yes because I pitied you, he said finally. I said yes because I recognized you. She frowned, confused. Recognized me? But he didn't explain. He only held her gaze with the same calm patience he had shown from the beginning, as if he had expected this moment all along, as if he had waited for it. Juliet stepped back, heart twisting in her chest. Nothing felt like pretend anymore. The garden behind the villa was quiet, bathed in a soft, golden glow from antique lanterns along the stone path. Strings of fairy lights twinkled overhead, casting faint shadows across the hedges and roses. It was the kind of place made for whispered confessions and unspoken truths. Juliet stood with her arms wrapped around herself, the night air cool against her satin dress. Kane was a few steps away, his face calm, unreadable. She had asked for answers. What she got instead was silence, heavy and full of something she couldn't name. Why did you say you recognized me? She asked quietly. Back inside you said it like it meant something. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn black wallet. From it, he carefully unfolded something small, soft, and pale. He stepped forward, holding it gently in both hands, a handkerchief, faded ivory, edges frayed but intact, and at one corner, stitched in pink thread, was a small, imperfect heart. Juliet's breath caught. "This," Kane said softly, "is yours." She stared at it. "What?" "10 years ago," he began, voice low. "I was 17. Angry, lost. I borrowed a motorbike and was riding through a part of the city most people avoid." He paused, eyes distant. "It was raining. I hit a turn too fast and crashed. My leg was pinned, my arm bleeding. No one stopped." Juliet stood still. "No one," he repeated. "Until you." His gaze met hers, steady. "You were wearing an oversized white shirt, hair in a loose braid. You didn't ask questions. You just knelt beside me, pulled this from your pocket, and cleaned the blood from my forehead like it was nothing." Juliet blinked, flashes of memory stirring, an alley, a boy groaning, the torn shirt she threw away after. That little handkerchief had been a school sewing project. She'd carried it for months. "You tore your shirt to tie around my arm," he said. "Then gave me this and disappeared before I could say thank you." Juliet reached for the handkerchief slowly, her hands trembling. "I never forgot that night," he said. "I kept it through everything, every job, every city. Even when I launched my company, I carried it in this pocket." He tapped the left side of his chest. "Close to my heart." Tears welled in Juliet's eyes. "You knew all this time?" Kane nodded. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. "I wanted to," he said. "But not in that room, not surrounded by people judging us. I didn't want what you did, what you gave me, to be part of something they could twist." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the handkerchief in her palm. "I barely remembered it," she said. "It felt small." "It wasn't," he replied. "It saved me. Not just physically. That night made me believe someone still cared. It made me want to become someone worth being helped." Silence stretched between them again. But this time, it was full of recognition and quiet reverence. Juliet pressed the fabric to her chest, holding it there. Her eyes glistened in the garden light, and just like that, a moment long buried bloomed into something that would never be forgotten. The villa had turned cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The laughter, the music, the warmth from earlier had vanished, replaced by hushed voices and sideways glances. Juliet felt it with every step back into the party. The weight of judgment, of eyes following her, of 1,000 questions pressing in. Her mother reached her first. "Juliet, what were you thinking?" she hissed, grabbing her arm. "You brought him here?" Juliet opened her mouth, but before she could speak, her father arrived. His face was flushed with humiliation and something deeper. "You brought Kane Astor to this party?" he asked, voice tight. "Do you want me to lose face in front of our entire family?" "I didn't know who he was," Juliet said quietly. Walter shook his head. "You're in love with the man who destroyed your uncle's company, who ruined our name. Is that it?" She flinched. Words stuck in her throat. She wanted to defend Kane, but not here. Not like this. She turned away and quickly climbed the stairs, needing air, space, anything. Upstairs, the guest room was quiet. Juliet stepped in, shut the door, and leaned against it, trying to breathe. Then she saw it, a light gray coat draped over the chair by the mirror. Resting on top, a folded slip of paper. She picked it up. The handwriting was careful. "The backyard's getting cold. I thought you might need this. See." Her chest tightened. Without any fuss or words, he'd anticipated this. That she'd be alone. That she'd be cold. She touched the fabric and reached into the coat pocket. Her fingers brushed a small object, a mint chocolate, her favorite. She remembered the exact moment she'd mentioned it in his car. "I don't care how expensive dessert is. Nothing beats mint chocolate after a long day." He had remembered, not out of obligation, just because. Juliet sat down, the coat in her lap, the note in her hand. Her heart ached, not with betrayal, but with something deeper. He'd seen her. Not the version she performed, not the one her family demanded, but the real Juliet. By the time she found him again, the party had mostly emptied. He stood alone near the garden, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, but distant. She approached slowly, coat in her arms. "You forgot this," she said. He turned, smiled faintly. "Didn't take it." "You remembered the chocolate," she said. "I remember the things that matter," he replied. Silence. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Everyone's upset. They think I'm foolish. Maybe I am." "No," he said softly. "You're not." She swallowed. "This started as a lie, but then you weren't pretending anymore." He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, the handkerchief, clean, folded. He took her hand and gently placed it in her palm. "This time you need it more than I do." Juliet's fingers curled around it, still warm from his touch. She looked at him, eyes stinging. "Why are you giving it back?" He paused. "I came for you, but I won't be the reason you get hurt." There was something in his voice, still steady, that unraveled her. He wasn't begging. He wasn't pleading. He was letting go. Kane stepped back slightly. "You don't owe me anything. But if someday you want to find me again, you'll know where to start." Then he turned and walked away. Juliet didn't stop him. She stood there beneath the soft garden lights, hand pressed around the handkerchief, the coat still draped over her arms, a mint chocolate in her pocket. And for the first time, she truly saw him, not the CEO, not the man from headlines, but the boy she had once helped, and the man who had since then quietly, unfailingly cared for her. He wasn't just someone she had saved. He was someone who had been saving her all along. Juliet hadn't gone to work for 3 days. She didn't call in sick. She just disappeared. Shut off her alarm, left her phone on silent, and wandered. The city outside her apartment moved like a machine, loud and predictable. But inside her, everything had come undone. This morning, she walked with no direction, her coat drawn close to her body, the pale autumn sun flickering between buildings. Her steps, almost unconsciously, took her back to the neighborhood where she used to live as a teenager. The sidewalks were cracked. The laundromat still had flickering signs, and the little alley behind the bakery still smelled like warm bread. It hadn't changed, but she had. As she passed the corner of 16th and Pine, an intersection she'd nearly forgotten, she slowed. The last time she had truly looked at this corner, she had been just a girl, just someone walking home with a second-hand backpack, never imagining a stranger's blood would end up on her shirt, or that a simple handkerchief would carry the weight of someone else's future. She stopped, sat on a bench near the old bus stop, and finally took out her phone. For a moment, she just stared at the screen. Then, with a deep breath, she opened the photo gallery. There were pictures, still frames from the night of the party. One of her and Kane, half smiling, eyes not quite matching their expressions. One of her alone in the mirror, adjusting her dress. And then, a short video clip. She had forgotten. She clicked it. The image shook slightly, the lighting off. It had clearly been a test shot, but the camera had kept recording longer than she intended. Juliet watched herself laughing at something her aunt said, turning away to greet a cousin. Behind her, just in the corner of the frame, was Kane. He reached out and gently brushed a small crumb from her shoulder. Then, careful not to disturb her, he pulled a napkin from the table and wiped the spot clean. His touch was feather-light, unseen. But what caught Juliet wasn't the gesture. It was his face. He wasn't acting. He wasn't pretending to be a boyfriend or charming a room full of skeptics. He was just looking at her with warmth, with quiet affection, with the kind of gaze no one gives someone they're faking it with. Juliet's breath itched. Her fingers trembled as she held the phone closer. He had looked at her like that all night. She just hadn't seen it. Her throat tightened. The video ended. Her reflection stared back at her from the black screen. "He has liked me for a long time," she whispered. "I just couldn't see it." The wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like whispers of something unsaid. Juliet leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and pulled something from her coat pocket. The handkerchief, still folded neatly, still soft from years of being held close to a heart that remembered. She pressed it to her lips, eyes stinging with tears. For 10 years he had kept it. For 10 years he had remembered. And she had forgotten. Forgotten that day, that act of kindness, that boy with the bleeding arm and the broken look in his eyes. She had saved him and walked away. He had carried her with him ever since. Juliet let out a quiet, shaking breath. "I remember every detail of that day," she whispered. "And I forgot." Her fingers clutched the fabric tighter. "But now, I will never forget again." She stood slowly, the sun now dipping lower, casting long shadows across the pavement, and for the first time in days, her direction was clear. It wasn't about names, wealth, or family pride. It was about something deeper, something real. And it had been waiting for her all along. The grand ballroom shimmered under golden chandeliers, filled with polished shoes, sparkling jewelry, and carefully measured smiles. It was the annual charity gala hosted by Raymond Holdings, a night to celebrate philanthropy, success, and legacy. Juliet stood near the back, dressed in a modest navy blue dress, arms crossed gently in front of her. She hadn't planned to come. She had nearly turned around at the door. But something in her head said, "Go. Just go." She didn't expect to see him. She wasn't even sure she wanted to. The stage lights dimmed slightly as the master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone, tapping it gently for attention. The crowd settled. Champagne glasses paused midair. "Tonight," the MC began, "we are proud to announce a new initiative that speaks to our company's evolving mission, not just to build wealth, but to rebuild lives." A few murmurs ran through the room. "This year, Raymond Holdings is launching a scholarship fund for the children of former factory workers, many of whom were affected during the merger and restructuring years ago. This fund totals $500,000 and is made possible by a contribution from someone who asked to remain anonymous." There was a pause. But when asked how they wanted the fund to be named, the MC continued, unfolding a small card. "They only said this: name it after someone who was once forgiven." The room stirred. Juliet's eyes widened slightly. Across the ballroom, she saw movement. Kane Astor stepped into view. He wore no tuxedo, no designer shoes, just a simple dark suit, no tie. His hair was neatly brushed back, his hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't walking toward the stage. He wasn't asking for credit. He was just standing there, watching. His eyes found hers and held. Juliet's breath caught. The MC cleared his throat. "At this time, we invite Miss Juliet Hale to say a few words. As someone with close ties to both sides of this story, we believe her voice is the one we need to hear." A few surprised glances turned her way. Juliet blinked, stunned. Then, slowly, she walked up the stairs to the podium, the silence in the room wrapping around her like a tight thread. She didn't have a speech. She barely had a plan. But when she looked out at the sea of faces and then back at Kane, standing so still at the edge of the crowd, her voice found its own path. "When I was little," she began softly, "my father used to say, people only remember the damage others cause. They rarely remember the kindness they once received." She paused. "But that's wrong," she said. "Or at least, it should be." She glanced at her father. Walter was sitting near the front, his eyes already red, his jaw tight with emotion. "The enemy is not the one who made you lose money," she said, her voice steady. "The enemy is when we let money matter more than people. When we forget the moments we were helped, loved, forgiven, even when we didn't deserve it." She looked again at Kane. No words passed between them. But her next sentence landed like a breath across every chest in the room. "The real loss," she said, "is when we forget the good that someone once gave us." The room fell completely silent. No coughs, no whispers, no glasses clinking, just stillness. Juliet stepped back from the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her head high. As she descended the stage, her father stood up slowly, a single tear slipping down his cheek. And across the ballroom, Cain gave her the smallest nod, not of triumph, not of victory, but of quiet, overwhelming gratitude. A year later, the building stood quietly on a corner in the revitalized part of town. It wasn't grand or imposing. Its bricks were worn with purpose, the sign modest but clean, Juliet Hale Foundation, founded by someone she once believed in. The words still made her heart skip every time she saw them. Inside, laughter and energy filled the halls. Young entrepreneurs, small business owners, and once forgotten dreamers gathered weekly here at Start Again Foundation, a space Juliet and Cain had built for those who had fallen, failed, or been underestimated. But Cain's name wasn't on any wall. He had insisted. "This place," he said, "should carry the name of the one who gave me mine back." That morning, Juliet stood at the front of the main hall, speaking to a group of eager new faces. Her voice was steady, her smile warm. She belonged here. From the back of the room, Walter sat quietly, watching his daughter with misted eyes. He whispered, more to himself than anyone. She never needed someone to lift her up, just someone to believe in her enough not to walk away. After the session, Juliet walked to her office and found a small note on her desk. One line. "Don't be late to coffee. Same place. See." Her heart fluttered. It was a golden autumn afternoon. The cafe hadn't changed. Same rust-colored awnings, same warm cinnamon scent from the ovens. But to Juliet, everything felt new. She walked in and spotted the envelope on that same table where it all began a year ago. Inside, the note read, "This time, don't walk away so fast." She smiled. Then he walked in. No suit, no spotlight, just Cain, calm, certain, steady. No flowers, no flashy ring, only a small wooden box in his hand. He sat across from her, eyes meeting hers with a quiet gentleness. "I kept this," he said softly, opening the box. Inside was the handkerchief, clean, restitched along the edges. In the corner, embroidered, "Found you forever." "I kept it to remind me of the good in the world," he said. "But this past year, I realized the treasure wasn't the memory. It was you. Not the girl who once helped me, but the woman you've become." He took a breath. "You taught me what love really looks like. Not grand gestures, not perfect timing, but patience, quiet loyalty, and the kind of attention that doesn't have to be loud to be true." Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Juliet, will you walk beside me, not just for a night, but for the rest of our lives?" Juliet felt the tears rise, but they didn't fall. Not this time. She reached out, closing his hand over the handkerchief. "You were never just a memory," she said, voice trembling. "You were the man who loved me without asking for anything. The man who remembered me even when I forgot myself." Her smile widened. "And now, I don't want to remember you just with a handkerchief. I want to remember you with a lifetime." Just then, a tiny voice broke through. "Auntie Juliet!" Uncle Cain dropped his wallet again. A little girl in a pink dress came running in, waving a wallet. Juliet laughed and scooped her up, kissing her cheek. "You little princess, always show up at the best moments." Cain chuckled, ruffling the girl's hair. From across the cafe, Walter watched quietly, a softness in his gaze. Not pride, not performance, but peace. "She didn't pick the richest man," he murmured. "She picked the one who saw her and never let go." If this story touched your heart, if you believe in love that grows in silence, in kindness that never asks for credit, and in second chances that heal not just people but entire families, then you're already part of our story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the hype button to support Soul Tapestry, where every tale is crafted to move your soul one heartbeat at a time. Because sometimes, all it takes is a story to remember the goodness we once forgot and maybe, just maybe, to believe in love again. See you in the next story.